After what month is it? After about 9 months, Ben, either of us could have had a child. We returned to Akira Kurosawa. He is one of the favorite film directors on the Movie Vault.
Most definitely. And he's also one of the most revered movie directors just in general in the cinephile culture.
So it's one thing to create a film, Sergio Leone, that influenced Star Wars, right? But it's another thing to influence the movie that influenced the movie Star Wars.
Yes,
so
certainly.
If you take enough steps back, you always get to Kurosawa. There is none before him besides the books that he bases movies off. And this film is based off of a different book than the film that this is a sequel to, which was Yojimbo. So today we are watching Sanjuro, which translates to 30-year-old. And we'll get more into the naming again. And Akira Kurosawa, again, is a Japanese film director. He has one of the greatest track records of any film director of all time. He has I think he has a large quantity of films with, 100% ratings on Rotten Tomatoes, IMDb. He has all the greatest films in the Criterion collection. And his films influence films. That's really how people know about Kurosawa is, this is an ode or a nod to Kurosawa's oldest, High and Low, or his Japanese samurai films, or Seven Samurai, which is actually my favorite film. And that's how most people get to him. So you trace any film back, you'll get to Kurosawa. That's kind of what my theory is at the moment when it comes to.
So he's
film.
like, in our rainforest analogy, he's like, if not the river. Yeah, I don't know what he's like a main branch of the river if he's not the main river itself.
Yeah, he's the Euphrates River in the middle of this forest, from which all of the other rivers flow, and it's a really cool. I mean, truly, like I've seen so many films, and I look up where does this come from? Where does this come from? And then I look up where does that come from? The thing that the thing came from. And it always goes back to Kurosawa. It's kind of creepy in some ways, He influenced film in so many ways. American Western film, Bollywood, everywhere. He influenced all these areas of film through his samurai movies, which is crazy. But really, he kind of started the reluctant anti-hero story arc. I would say he did not take it too far because he gives redeeming qualities to these characters. Sanjuro, whatever, Yojimbo, is no Deadpool. He's actually a good man who protects and cares about people. But he started that process of starting to open up the field in that direction. So today we're reviewing that film, and it's our third Akira Kurosawa film that we're reviewing. We did Seven Samurai and Yojimbo, and finally coming around to our third film. And maybe one day we'll do High and Low. Maybe one day we'll do something else. We'll see.
We do them about one every 15 to 20 episodes. We're doing a Kurosawa movie.
About
That's
6 months.
It's like our trend.
Mm-hmm.
So 15 episodes from now, maybe we'll sprinkle in another Kurosawa gem for you.
So crazy enough. So this film came out in 1962 on January 1st in Japan. And Yojimbo came out actually a year earlier than this. So they kind of filmed these back to back, I'm guessing, just with Toshiro Mifune just working nonstop, I guess. And the critical success of Yojimbo actually led to this, but it must have been successful early on because this film came out very early the next year. And not only in the next year, but on the first day of the next year. So they really put these next to each other. And it's based off of a book. Ben, you'll have to look up the actual title because I read it in Japanese, but not the book, the title of the book. But it's based off of a separate book than Yojimbo was based off of, but Kurosawa took the main character of the second book and put Yojimbo, the character, as the title, as the main character in the second book. So he kind of tweaked it a little bit. What's it called?
It's called Peaceful Days.
Okay.
Which maybe is an ironic title because they're not very peaceful throughout the whole movie.
No.
But I guess he had intended it to be a direct adaptation and then ended up reimagining it, like you're saying.
Yeah. And who is it? Shuguro Yamamoto's.
So this is like the early days of the sequel too, because I think Yojimbo was successful. So then they were like, the studio was like, well, why don't we make another we already have Toshiro Mifune, who's also one of the best actors of all time.
Yeah.
And we can just like continue on with this like character because people liked it. So then they took what they already had and kind of probably tweaked it.
Yeah.
So it fit.
And it's interesting too because it's not even, and maybe we should go back to this in Western cinema, where the sequels, we base the first book or first film off of a book, and then we make a sequel that we just make up, right? That's often the case. If you only have one book and you want a sequel, you kind of just make up the second film. And this, he actually takes another book, like unrelated by a different author, and makes the sequel of the first film of that, just taking the main character and putting him in another book, like literally taking the main character of one book and putting him in another book.
Right. This might be a bad comparison, but some TV shows are set up to be like you have the same characters, but every episode's kind of its unique thing on its own,
like an anthology series.
Yeah, like anthology, or even like Rick and Morty's has a little bit too much of a actual plot to fully, but each episode's supposed to be its own adventure, its own like thing.
The Simpsons would be a good example of anthology.
So maybe like in the precursor to all of that, before TV like took off as a possibility to do like more things with, they did stuff like this where they would just like take a character and you just like take them from one place and put them in a different place.
Yeah.
And that's the only continuity.
Yeah, Twilight Zone does a little bit of that.
Because Man with No Name trilogy is essentially that.
Yeah.
The only continuity is that he's in all of the movies.
Yep.
And that's why you can tell that it's like directly, almost stolen.
I'm glad you brought that up
from it,
because they're also based on different books, those films. Yeah. So it's just interesting that Sergio Leone looked at Kurosawa. They're in completely different countries, different times. Sergio Leone was 15 years later, around there. Those were late 60s, early 70s, right?
Yeah. So I mean, he wasn't. Yeah. Like from the time that Kurosawa started to the time that Leone.
So maybe 10 years. Yeah.
Like Kurosawa was like late 40s when he started, but he really hit big out in 54, and so then like 10 years later.
And 54 was Seven Samurai.
Yeah.
The thing is, the Sergio Leone though kind of took note of Kurosawa early on, but he took note of specifically his Man with No Name trilogy. No, sorry, Ronin with No Name.
Yeah.
What's it called? Dilogy and biology, and made the Man with No Name trilogy. They're so similar in so many ways. All 5 films, truly, just very similar. Just someone who isn't really close with anyone, just like traveling, doesn't ever give anyone his name, goes into a town, sees a conflict, tries to help the weak and defeat the strong.
And honestly, you could kind of make the argument that unintentionally Seven Samurai kind of fits with these two movies, because if I'm not mistaken from remembering that movie, Toshiro Mifune's character is he's like the ringleader of a group of people who are like the same kind of characters. They're like samurai who are coming out of the like traditional samurai period, who are like bucking the traditions of but coming to the aid of people who are helpless, or in the case of Sanjuro, who are stupid.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
In Seven Samurai as well, they're kind of dumb.
Yeah.
And truly, he comes to a town to protect this village in Seven Samurai.
But the funny thing is, Seven Samurai is like the good, the bad, and the ugly of the 3.
You're right.
But it comes like before.
It's the most epic, has the greatest soundtrack. And the best thing is, so Kurosawa has this really specific, hyper-focused lean on the end of the Edo period.
Yeah, he loves
Japanese samurai, where he takes this highly disciplined, extremely moralistic, pragmatic samurai character, and says, what happens after that structure is gone, and nobody's holding you accountable to those morals, and you're just traveling by yourself, and you kind of have to make a living by asking for money and begging. What would that type of samurai do? And that's a really, really interesting question. And Kurosawa obviously is Japanese, so he comes from a culture that revered and honored samurai and actually had samurai in them. We come from an American culture that never had samurai, so he has closer connections to samurai. So maybe he definitely knows a lot more than we do. So that question would come more naturally. And for us, that's interesting, you know, because we see like who's revered in our society, doctors and lawyers. Well, do they make mistakes? Yes, of course. We see that all the time. You know, we're in the end of the doctor and lawyer period, and maybe Breaking Bad is basically that an example of that. Or not even, Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul is what I meant.
Even like business executives, I think maybe less so revered as like, but like, you know, respected. Now we're still coming out of that like period of like, okay, just because you wear a suit and drive a fancy car doesn't mean that I think that you're a great person or a successful person. Or
in fact, we're in a place in society where we assume they're evil. Yeah. Which is fair from a Christian perspective. But I'm just saying, like, after the Me Too movement and all these other things come out, like, there are some crazy things going on. And you hear things about Bill Gates and, you know, the lizard boy.
P. Diddy.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. It's just crazy, you know? And
it's nuts.
Lizard boy is the Facebook guy, Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
But he anyway, so we're coming out of that period, and maybe that's the American translation of Kurosawa's fascination.
But I think you can go interesting there. I guess there was a European bridge, but we do have this in America. It's the Wild West. So this was our, you know, we're fascinated by points in history that were like untouched by society, but like we're starting to come around, or, you know, depreciating, or like where laws and morals are more like a choice that you have to. There wasn't like a society that was strong enough to hold them in place. So it came down to like individuals being like, we're going to take a stand, or evil people coming in and running things. Yeah. Like the plot of lots of Western movies is, you know, there's like an oil tycoon who's, you know, has a stranglehold on the town, and the you know, noble cowboy has to come in and you know, defeat it, and or, you know, there's conflict of some kind, or they're in the middle of the Civil War, or you know, they're maybe not the right view, but a lot of cowboys and Indians plots in the 30s, 40s, and 50s.
Little cliched, but yeah, I see what you mean.
So that just touched on, I don't know, a society that was not as civilized as maybe the eastern part of the United States that had already, you know, maybe we just forget about when that was not, you know,
Boston, Massachusetts.
Yeah, it's not New England, it's not these other places. But in Japanese history, it seems like the period of the samurai is like kind of comparable, although for different reasons. Like you said, that in some ways their form of society is like deteriorating, which is instead of kind of Western, as far as Western society goes, for the people who are spreading west, there would only be an increase of civilization, at least in a Western manner. Anyway, I don't want to go on to history.
Yeah, modernism and Platonic thought. Yeah. I just think there's a lot of that in there. You're right. And you're right. They're on different trajectories. Like the cowboys were probably not the most moralistic in their heyday, right? But the samurai in their heyday, you know, had structure. They had things that they followed. And we talked about this in the Yojimbo and in the Seven Samurai episodes. So go back to those if you want to learn a little bit more about the Edo period. And post-Edo period is just so interesting. And I don't know if like this is the only historical
like basis that
information
we have.
that I know about the end of the Edo period. You know, during the Edo period, you know, shoguns, samurai, but the end of it, like everything I know is from Kurosawa. So
I'm taking that at face value.
Yeah, me too.
Maybe if anyone wants to recommend me a good book, might take me a year to read it, but
yeah, don't recommend me a book right now. I'm not in a good stage for that. But I think, yeah. So anyway, so Kurosawa's fascination about that, but even furthermore, like just taking the same character and using him in another film like this is just genius. And I don't know if he invented that or not, because you're right. This is the beginning of the sequel. I mean, the sequel era, I guess. And he did it based off of critical success, which is like kind of marvel of him. But it worked out.
And maybe that teaches a little bit about the business of film, because I feel like right now we're also in a place where people are kind of arguing about like what should the goal of filmmaking be. But it always, the goal has always been to make money for studios, and for filmmakers, that's just like a reality. Like in order to be able to get the funding to make the film that you want to, you have to be able to some degree work within the confines of somebody that's going to fund your film, unless you are a billionaire by some other, avenue and already have a bunch of money and just can fund your own passion projects like Francis Ford Coppola, then, you know, and he even still had to, you know, get distribution through a company. So you live in the confines of these. So what can you do? What can you do when you're within the confines of rules? And I think that's actually the best filmmakers that we've seen have been able to successfully work within those confines and make amazing works of art. And eventually that builds trust from studios. So it's a little bit of it goes both ways, because you know, there's many examples of very artistic filmmakers, visionary filmmakers who just take a budget and just you know, it doesn't really go anywhere commercially, and that's just not necessarily viable. So you either got to be able to work on a very small budget, or if you want a bigger budget, you got to be creative. And it seems like Kurosawa did that. He was like, okay, I'm willing to, you know, take the Yojimbo character because that was successful, and I'll just adapt it to what I'm already doing. Yeah. So the flexibility is also a good lesson to be learned. And I think, you know, looking at the masters of the craft, that's kind of what you're looking for. Like, how did they make decisions? Why were their films always successful, seemingly? Yeah. You know, maybe they had a few flops, but... And
you're right. Toshiro Mifune and Clint Eastwood had a lot to do with the success. And truly, that's a good thing, because they are both great in their roles. And you can't separate them from the story, right? You have to have this intermixing of greatness in the cast and greatness in the actual story. And I think that's why Kurosawa was... I think it was also his idea to use Mifune in both films. So I think he recognized that not only does that grant success for him, but it also creates a good story. So I think it's a win-win. It's almost like putting Daniel Day-Lewis in something. Like, people will watch it and it's going to be great, you know? Whereas, like, if you're going to do, I don't know, put in some other famous actor. I'm not going to call anyone say anything to the detriment of anyone else right now, maybe later on. But put another big-name actor in there and the movie's not going to be as good, you know? Because some directors have to make those sacrifices, you know? This actor will bring in a lot of people, but it's not going to be as good. But there are rare actors in life where popularity and, like, demand and supply of quality acting are both really high. Yeah. And you don't always have that in the economics of acting. And it's hard because the average filmmaker is really dumb. No, not filmmaker, film watcher, sorry. The average film watcher is really dumb. And let me explain, because they are going to prefer, you know, the spectacle, the action, the cool or the mystical, rather than good drama or good stories sometimes, or interesting concepts, you know. Whereas the people who actually enjoy watching lots of films will often come to a conclusion that the larger conceptual, thought-provoking films are actually the most interesting. The weighty films, the ones that are about tragedies, you know, the ones that make you depressed after watching them, those are actually worth watching. That's you know, far and few compared to the large majority of Marvel movie watchers, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I think when you have to find an actor in a main role like this, for a main role like this, you have to sacrifice often quality for demand, supply for demand. But the rare actors like Mifune and Eastwood really, really make up for that deficit. Yes. And Daniel Day-Lewis is the modern version of that for me. Yeah. Coming off of There Will Be Blood, I mean, just come on. That's great.
And it is interesting with Mifune. Like, I've seen 5 Akira Kurosawa movies now. 3 we've reviewed, and then Rashomon and High and Low. And Mifune is the star of every single one of them. Yep. And they're, like, the most popular, among the most popular. Actually, Yojimbo and Sanjuro are probably the least popular of the ones that I've watched.
Oh, Ben, you know what we missed on the Punch Drunk Love episode? What? Where we talked about pairings? Yeah. Of directors and actors? We forgot Mifune Kurosawa. Yeah. That's probably one of the greatest ones.
That's it. Yeah, there's an argument to be made that it is the greatest, because he is amazing in every single performance, elevates the movie. And what would the other ones be? We already mentioned
De Niro.
Scorsese, De Niro.
I mean, we said PTA and Sander.
No,
Adam Sandler.
That's only one.
I know. That's only one pairing. But PTA, Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yeah,
that's got to be the greatest one right now.
Yeah, that's a really good pairing. It's too bad it's only 2 movies.
I would put that one above De Niro, Scorsese right now.
Yeah.
In my head.
In your head. Mm-hmm. I could respect that. I'm trying to even think.
Because De Niro Scorsese is on the down. It's almost over. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and it's unfortunate that Daniel Day-Lewis retired. Otherwise,
well, he came out of retirement in 2017 for that. So we'll see if he comes out of retirement later on. You know?
Yeah.
If he's anything like his character Daniel, they have the same name, and There Will Be Blood, then he'll come out of retirement for it. But yeah, there are some Quentin Tarantino and.
Oh, I forgot. QT and Samuel L. Jackson.
Well, also Bruce Willis. Is he in a couple of those? Or no?
I think he's only in Pulp Fiction.
Okay, I don't know what I was thinking then.
Somebody said Ben Affleck in his own movies.
Okay. Ben Affleck and himself.
I'm sure we could think of more if we. Kyle MacLachlan, David Lynch.
Yes. Okay.
That's a great combo.
That's a great combo. It's not like in the greatest, but it's.
No, it's a great combo for like different reasons. I feel like
because they complement each other so well.
Yeah, they complement each other really well. I do think Lynch elevates MacLachlan quite a bit.
Yeah.
And he really knows. Which I mean, that's the sign of a great director, right? Mm-hmm. You can really bring the greatness out of someone.
Yeah.
So like, for whatever reason, MacLachlan fit exactly what. I mean, he probably fit within who David Lynch could hire first of all, because he was in Dune.
Yeah.
And then he was in Blue Velvet, and then he was in Twin Peaks.
Tell me the best.
Then you gain trust, and then you're like, okay, I can see this. I mean, it's hard to argue anyone could play Agent Cooper as well as Kyle MacLachlan, and it's like,
yeah,
and it's like he just has the perfect, like, you just can't imagine anyone else.
Exactly, you're right.
Pulling that off.
You're right.
Because it's a weird role. It's not like a traditional strong.
Well, Lynch made the role around him too.
Right.
You can tell because a lot of his character mannerisms have to do with his actual mannerisms. Anyway, tell me the best combo within one singular film, not across many films.
Within one singular film.
Director, actor. I'm going with Lynch, Laura Dern.
In Inland Empire.
In Inland Empire, yep. Where he stood on the corner with the cow requesting that she would win an Academy Award, right?
Yeah. What about oh shoot. Is it? Why am I blanking on who the lead of The Deer Hunter is? Is that
De Niro?
It's De Niro, right?
Yeah.
De Niro and whoever the guy, Michael, what's his face? That's a great performance. I barely even remember what the director's name is of The Deer Hunter because he's not actually like
Michael Cimino. Is that
Michael
what you're saying?
Cimino?
Oh,
that's a good.
Yeah, I thought you were saying within the movie. Okay. Christopher Walken.
Within the movie? Like, I was just saying, like, his performance.
Oh, yeah.
Is amazing. But I'm not as sold on Michael Cimino as a director, although I think that movie works really well.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. That's a hard question.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going with Lynch Dern. 2024.
That's a good.
That's what the movie vault is. That's our official stance.
That's our official political stance. David Lynch would be a great president because he'd just be like, I had a dream.
Where animals were actually running
Let's all go paint and listen to abrasive music and let's have everyone just had a good cup of coffee.
Yeah, that would solve everyone's issues. Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. David Lynch for president. The movie vault is an independent voter.
Yeah.
We've registered independent. Not Ben and Zach. We won't discuss that, but the movie vault officially.
The movie vault's official ballot.
The LLC is voting because now LLCs they're allowed to vote now.
Yeah.
If they can own stocks, they can vote. Okay.
If they can own private housing.
Yeah. Exactly. If BlackRock can own half of the housing.
Actually, I think what they should do is private equity. If you like rent from private equity, then your vote goes to the corporation. So, and like you have to own your own house
to vote. Kind of like you had to own, to own property.
You had to own property. Right? We're gonna go back to that.
Interesting.
So then it'll just be like two people voting for president. So
who would the two people be? BlackRock, Vanguard.
The CEO of BlackRock and the CEO. What's his name? Larry Fink or whatever.
Yeah, and Bob Iger. Yeah, that would be.
Yeah.
Well, Chick-fil-A.
They're the people who give all the money to the just. Why don't they just be president? Why don't we just have a board that's just like BlackRock, Vanguard, Disney? Why don't we just have them like bulldoze the White House? Yeah, we got Chick-fil-A. They can be like the more conservative side. Yeah, they just have like big board.
They'll meetings. Be the token red people.
Bulldoze the state capitol, the Capitol building,
and just set up a giant Chick-fil-A.
If we're gonna have an oligarchy, let's do it right. Let's
I agree with
Let's
you.
actually do an oligarchy.
I agree with you.
Instead of this pretend it's not actually an oligarchy, but it really is.
Listen, we can live in whatever state the deep state is controlling right now, but at the same time, why don't we just be honest with ourselves?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Well, it doesn't have to be deep. Just make it like surface level state.
Yeah. Surface level state is just as intimidating.
Then everyone knows what's going on, and nobody's upset. There's no conspiracies anymore.
We're not mad that Chick-fil-A is making a streaming service. Like, we're not angry at that, right? I mean, I might be but as a society, the common moviegoer, right? The dumb people, they're not mad at that. So let's just let them run everything, right? Let's have Chick-fil-A do our taxes.
Yeah. So the conservative states will be run by Chick-fil-A and Hobby Lobby and other
Menards.
What's the pillow company? My Pillow.
Helix?
No, My Pillow. You know that
Pillow?
guy? He's like a conservative.
Uh-oh.
So that he can be the governor of
you're
South
saying
Dakota.
okay.
Yeah. And then the more liberal states, they can be Bill Gates.
And put him on and then put him on a panel with Sarah Palin and Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris.
Yeah, the career politicians.
Sure, yeah.
It's because that's a business.
Yeah.
So they can have their own business.
Yep.
Politics Inc.
If there are buttons and shirts, it's a business. That's what I say. So we need to get some buttons and shirts.
I hope they're listening to this right now, because
I hope Tim Walls is listening.
I honestly
Montana
think
Lake
this
right
would
now.
relieve a lot of stress for the people who are trying to run things anyway.
Yeah, Kamala.
They don't have to be as secretive then anymore.
Kamala and Trump. I know you're both.
You know
very
how they
stressed.
say power for the people? I say power for the companies.
Power for Chick-fil-A.
I'm
just
Chick-fil-A.
really hungry for Chick-fil-A.
Well, you're voting with your dollar when you go to Chick-fil-A.
Mm-hmm.
So that's you're voting when you buy Disney Plus.
Sure.
That it's essentially voting.
Yeah.
So you don't have to go vote. That's like a lie that they make up. Like, you're already voting right now with your Netflix subscription.
If we vote indirectly with our money, then that means corporations even control the amount of voting that we can do.
Right. Because that money, some of it goes to politicians, and then
And taxes.
Yeah, and taxes.
Yeah.
And that goes to their campaigns.
And I'm saying the companies control the amount that we make.
Right. And if you tried to boycott companies, you would
you lose all your
you would
rights.
starve.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would lose your right to live because you wouldn't be able to survive.
Interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, back to Sanjuro.
Yeah, we haven't even gotten into anything. Let me do a quick plot synopsis.
This is kind of like our. We actually really respect this movie because what was the one episode?
National Guard.
National Guard.
Treasure.
National Treasure. We didn't talk about the movie at all.
We talked about the Saudis.
Yeah.
So if you want to hear more about our,
I haven't re-listened to that episode. It might. I don't know what I said. So that might be the slightly dangerous part. I mean, nobody really cares.
That's an episode where if the Saudi royal family saw that, listen to it. Sorry, it might.
They also could. They can have a seat at the table.
Yeah, they already do.
They already
with
are.
Oil.
If we just cut out oil, we would be.
You can't just
doing
cut out
great.
oil, but yeah.
Well, yeah, no.
Electric cars, Elon Musk. It's up to you. Again, company. All right. Sanjuro starts with the titular character of Yojimbo, who was a bodyguard in the original film, coming into this film as another Ronin nameless samurai who is named 30-year-old Camellia, which is a type of flower. And of course, that's not his real name. That's just what he goes by, and the Chamberlain's wife really appreciates that. But so he comes into this town. He is just staying the night in this area, in this house where these 9 samurai are, and these 9 samurai are talking about this this court claim that they made about committing fraud. Someone committed fraud, and they report it to the Chamberlain. And then they hear that the Chamberlain ripped it up, which is unlike the Chamberlain because they really respect the Chamberlain. And then they don't hear from the Chamberlain. And the Ronin comes up, Sanjuro, I'll just call him Sanjuro, comes up and talks about how he thinks it's a little suspicious. So then they go, and then they finally realize, the Chamberlain is actually in trouble, and the superintendent, the guy in charge of the whole state, is up to no good. So Sanjuro realizes this, kind of helps the 9 samurai get their act together. Then they go to one of the outposts of the superintendent. They find the maidservant of the Chamberlain and his family there. They ask the maidservant to get the guards drunk, so she does with sake, which is another great because they love sake in the Yojimbo film. And
we need to get some sake.
Yeah, we do. We should do that for the next Kurosawa film. And so then they go and they get the guards drunk, and then they go and rescue Mifune, or not Mifune, the Chamberlain's wife and daughter. And the Chamberlain's wife is kind of in the heart of this film, where the morals of this film, the themes of this film come from this woman of wisdom who says something like, who critiques Sanjuro and says, you are a very sharp sword, right? But the best swords are kept in their sheath. You're a sword without a sheath. You're just open. You're free. And that's not a good thing, is what she was saying. So she warned him to not kill people. And, of course, he puts himself in situations where he has to kill people. So Sanjuro goes on to another outpost, and the 9 samurai and Sanjuro are trying to attack, not attack, but spy on this Chamberlain area, the Chamberlain's men, to see like what's going on. And then they see that the superintendent's men are there to kind of watch over the Chamberlain's men. So they realize, okay, the superintendent is actually bad. The superintendent's trying to frame the Chamberlain, and that's because the superintendent wanted to do some evil. They didn't say what specifically, but wanted to do some evil things that the Chamberlain wasn't happy with because he's a moral man. So now they're on a quest to save the Chamberlain, and the Chamberlain's wife and daughter are with the 9 samurai and Sanjuro, and they make a plan to where Sanjuro will take a spot within the guard of the superintendent under Heibe, who is the kind of like second in command to the superintendent, and Sanjuro was offered a job by him. So he goes, takes the job. He has to kind of infiltrate, and then he takes these camellias as signals through the stream to tell the people when the guards were gone. And he gets the guards out of the superintendent's outpost by saying, hey, I slept somewhere and I saw those 9 samurai or the enemies in that area, so go over there. So all the superintendent's men leave, including Heibe, and lets Sanjuro eat there because he said he was hungry and he doesn't want to work on an empty stomach. And then he sends the camellias down the stream, and the Chamberlain's wife and daughter see it, and the 9 samurai come in, attack, and they win. They save the Chamberlain. And that's kind of the heart of the story. Then at the end, the next day, the Chamberlain and his wife and daughter are there. The 9 samurai, they have a spot for Sanjuro. He's not there. They go look for him, and the Chamberlain says he's not going to come back, and it's confirmed. Sanjuro says he's not coming back. He fights Heibe. They have a moment of silence where they just kind of stay in there, and he kills him really fast, and tons of blood squirts out of his chest.
Classic Kurosawa.
Great.
I haven't watched Throne of Blood, but I know that the most famous scene in that is similar.
Yeah. And then that's the end of the film. He walks away, and they bow to him because he says if they follow him, he'll kill them. So it's a classic. And you can tell he's internally angry because he confirms that the Chamberlain's wife was right about him being, a naked sword.
And it's the most philosophically interesting part of the movie is the last couple lines. A sword in its sheath is it's better. Yeah. Essentially, I am the sword, and I don't like that I'm the sword.
Yeah.
Essentially,
he's too sharp.
Yeah.
And at first, when she said that, I thought she meant smart, but she meant dangerous. Because he's too quick to act, and he came into a situation that wasn't even his own, took responsibility, and acted and killed people. Saved the day, right? Because he's good, but he killed people, is what the Chamberlain's wife was afraid of.
He's kind of like Batman.
A little bit.
Other than Batman there's no conflict. He makes this choice before he ever became Batman, and he never kills anyone in the history of time.
Well, he owned a mega corporation, so he already had to kill people, right? So
yeah, that's true. That's true. Batman, he gets a seat at the table too.
Yeah, he does.
So even Batman influenced, although I say that knowing that Batman the comics were probably started before Kurosawa, honestly.
Yeah, maybe.
Or around the same time period. So maybe idea. Later on it became influenced by Kurosawa's
Fantastic
work.
Four was in the 40s, I think, World War II area.
Yeah. Batman, maybe the TV show is in the 60s. So it had to be the 50s at least.
Yeah, you don't make a TV show less than 20 years after the comics come out, right?
Right. But I'm saying eventually, the grittier, stylized versions of Batman maybe have some Kurosawa influence on them.
Yeah, he's no spandex.
You can
Batman.
see the samurai post, what is it, Edo, post Edo period.
Yeah.
Sort of element to Batman.
Sure. Yeah. So, what did you think the strength of the themes of this film were? I'm talking about the Chamberlain's wife and Sanjuro. I thought that was strong.
Yeah, that was a really good, interesting point. And in your Letterboxd review, you point out how it's a little bit different than Yojimbo. Mm-hmm. The character actually adjusts to when like moral criticism is made of him, because he's like, well, we have to kill these people. She's like, no, don't kill anyone.
And she's honestly my favorite character in this film.
Yeah.
She's really good. And Kurosawa, to his credit, does great with women characters. For the 1950s and 60s, he does really good. Even in Yojimbo, like, the woman was running the thing. Not that, I'm saying that women have to run things. I'm just saying, like, the characters were strong and good.
And some people might complain that there's only 2 women in the entire film.
It doesn't pass the Bechdel test.
But it's not about the amount. It's about the quality that they are given. Because sometimes there's like there's like 50% women, but they don't really do anything. Yeah. So is that any better? So anyway, and the culture, the culture at the time, very, women were kind of in the background, and this was a thing that happened that forced them to be put in the foreground.
Well, that's why we believe it is historically accurate, because women were not samurai.
Yeah.
So
and she was able to act in the role that she was able to perform, which is she influenced, what was going on through her words of wisdom and her thoughts on morality. And it lends, you don't really see the Chamberlain too much throughout the film, so it kind of lends to like, oh, this is a unified like marriage between 2 people who have like similar
that's a great
thoughts point. And
they both are really good, like, nice.
Yeah.
And they're really good to the people
is even self-deprecating. He says he has a long face like a horse.
That was the best line in the film. He says something like, a man saw me riding on a horse and said, man, the man's face is longer than the horse's face. That's the best thing.
A lot of these Asian cinema like movies, because I think of like Parasite 2, South Korean, like sometimes the societal like commentary goes kind of over our Americanized heads, because we just don't live in these cultures and don't think about things exactly the same ways to see the very like nuanced take. But I was reading about this movie, and there's a lot of like social commentary between like the roles and the class of people. And of course, like, there's a lot of comedy with how bumbling the samurai are, and they're always like, they sort of trust Yojimbo or Sanjuro, but they also don't, or they're quick to like act, like change the plan. At the end of the movie, I remember them saying, "Wait, we've always been wrong every single time that we've tried to do something different. Maybe we should wait for a signal." And then it worked out according to plan.
Good.
So there's something to be said about maybe like organization and trusting someone who is an expert in the field. But also, it shows that experts also have their weaknesses.
Yes, they do. And again, going back to the doctor, lawyer, samurai situation, like, it's just we put them in a position of high authority and power because of the skills that they have spent time to learn, right? And yet they still fall short. But the Chamberlain and his wife seem to really uphold that authority well.
And so maybe the thing to be learned is that the sign of a great, like, there's always going to be people who are put in positions of authority. So the sign of somebody who is in authority and is good at being in authority is they're willing to take criticism and change. Mm-hmm. So they aren't immediately defensive. Like, they also have a strong sense of like trying to look out for the good of the people who are beneath them.
Yep.
So sometimes I think people in these positions can get tunnel vision a little bit. Yeah. They're focused on one thing, or if you have a little bit of insecurity, then you're like, oh, is somebody questioning everything about, you get a little bit of criticism. You're like, oh, is somebody questioning all of my skills related to the position I'm in? But that's not necessarily the case. Yeah. It might just be, it might not even be that big of an adjustment that needs to be, that, could be made. Yeah. So there's a lot to be learned in that regard with this movie too.
Yeah. And going into a new area, the Takako Airi is the actress that plays the Chamberlain's wife. I was just kind of looking into her a little bit, and she's actually a big star. And I didn't realize this until I researched a little bit, but she started in The Water Magician, which is, well, she didn't start there. She started in Nikatsu in 1927, Ben. And then, so she's right in the first, 30 years of film. And then went into The Water Magician. That's one of her most famous. But it was actually her own production company, Airi Productions, that made this. So, like, Kurosawa got the big guns for this film, and that's why she stands out. She obviously has a lot of like gravitas with her character, because she can like go boat up against these strong samurai men, including Mifune's character, with ease. And the lines that she delivers is just so off the tongue and quick, and wise. It's not even like the way that she says it isn't just combative or against against Sanjuro's philosophy, but it's also kind and gracious.
Yeah.
Even when Sanjuro was trying to get everybody over the fence, he like respected her so much because of the way that she delivered her wisdom to him, that he was willing to let her step on his back. And she refused at first because she's trying to be respectful. And everybody's about to die, so there's no time to be respectful to each other. But that's because Sanjuro upholds his samurai position. She upholds her whatever moral position she has in ruling the people that she rules with the Chamberlain. So I just think there's so much. I love it when movies prioritize honor. I think of all the films that are out now are about don't trust authorities. Anti-establishment Antarianism is what they say. But it's just like the questioning authorities, postmodern views. David Lynch is one of those people. And again, there's something to questioning. But it's like when there's a movie about honoring your mother and father. I said mother and father, but mother and father. Like that's a really, really. I respect that. Like films that show honor is a good thing. So like, I'm trying to think. Maybe I can't even think of a film like on the top of my head.
Well, I can only think of like I see your point, because nowadays a lot of movies are just like questioning things, and they kind of just leave you in the same place that they started to begin with. There's no like resolution. There's no, we talked about a lot of these like anti-hero or just at least movies about people who don't improve.
Yeah.
I was talking about Trees Lounge and Steve Buscemi, and like just being like, he's just a piece of crap, and like at the end of the movie he's still that way. And it's an interesting movie, and it evokes some sort of like, but it's kind of just like, oh man, like there's nothing to be learned here.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
definitely.
like I already kind of knew that drinking alcohol all day and starting questionable relationships with people is not a good idea. So it hasn't really furthered my understanding of that.
Yeah.
And it's they're exploring something, but and that's not even a recent film. I guess to some degree you could say the Marvel movies kind of had that honor, but
Captain America.
Captain America. They dealt too with questioning authority in a lot of the movies, because it was like, how do you regulate superheroes, or what?
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff. Should you honor superheroes? They're just human.
Those are good. Thank you for doing first time on the podcast we're talking good about a Marvel movie. That's good.
That's true, because
good qualities.
I'm thinking about what happened in culture that is representing some of the ideas that happen, and like I think to some degree Marvel movies did do that. I think what we complain about is just lack of vision now.
No, we need our tour theory.
Yeah, not necessarily that they're bad or there's nothing to be learned from them. It's more so, what's the goal, or it's good to have other things too. Yeah, it's like we feel like we've kind of like honed in on this is the only thing that we do spend our money on now, and there's nothing else. But yeah, there's I think like Captain America is a great example of like honor, and like not just that Captain America is something to be honored, but he tries to be an honorable person.
Exactly, he strives for that, and in this
it's an idealized version of like military and stuff
for sure.
And there's a lot of I'm sure a lot of war films. I think people are drawn to war films because of the sort of like you're doing it like kind of for the society that you live in, and it's like a huge struggle that people go through. So
unless you're in Full Metal Jacket and you're just wanting to kill.
But then like you start to think about it from a big picture, and you're like, okay, the war is, we see the honor that soldiers have, but like, what about the people who are deciding to go to war and make decisions? So that's where the questioning comes in.
Yeah.
And that's where the Vietnam War films come in.
I was about to say that. And listen to our reviews on Platoon and whatever else we did. I would love to do Apocalypse Now and Full Metal Jacket one day.
So maybe it just goes to show, but I think overall that you're correct that we underutilize honor as something that should be used in movies.
Yeah, unless it's like to ourselves, like let's claim our own honor. No, you can't honor don't stop loving yourself so much. You know what I mean? It's annoying, and that's the mode that our country's in. Watch Tim Dillon's "This Is Your Country." Okay, we're gonna promote that officially as the movie vault. It's probably a horrible show that has horrible morals, but it's like this is a picture of what our country looks like, and it's disgusting sometimes. But also like this Japanese cinema just really highlights like the honor of the samurai, and that's a thing that should be revered. We should revere those people who honor, and we should also revere people in our own lives, because then we can be honorable, and then people can revere us. We don't need to revere ourselves. We should have other people revere us, but not because we want them to revere us, but because we're already revering others. If that makes sense, you can skip back 15 seconds. If not, whatever. But the idea of him letting the Chamberlain's wife step on his back so that she can go over this fence and save her life, that's a super honorable thing, especially for a man who has no association to any of these people, just wants to save them. Yojimbo did the same thing. He wanted to save the man and his family, and so he killed all those bodyguards that were guarding him. So it's just like this character, Sanjuro, Yojimbo, is a character of honor, even though he doesn't act like it or talk like it, because he called the woman stupid, right? He did. He called her an idiot or something like that. And yet that's just how he talks, is what they say. And they even use that example of him as a step stool for the Chamberlain's wife as a reason to trust him. So honor goes far. So that's a Kurosawa. I just respect Kurosawa for that. You see, he shows honor as a good thing by honoring the people in the film. Then I honor him. You know what I mean? It's just it's cyclical, but we can't force it. You just got to honor people.
And all the filmmakers we like, they all revere the filmmakers that they like, and they talk all about them. They talk great things about these filmmakers, and it's a lot of like paying homage and
unless you're Orson Welles.
Orson Welles apparently hates homage.
Yeah.
Thinks you shouldn't watch movies to be.
Well,
he was an eccentric filmmaker to begin with, as he started on radio. So
and he might have been his own character in Citizen Kane. We'll see. Maybe he was self-honoring.
Yeah. So I mean, there's differing opinions on things, but yeah, honor's a great thing, and I think something that I tend to kind of be a little bit cynical, and I think on the Movie Vault, like we listen to podcasters who are cynical. There's a lot of cynicism, and some of it's warranted, but sometimes we forget that ideals are not a bad thing. Like,
it has to be a balance.
I'm like, that's way too idealistic. Well, it's idealistic for a reason, because we should be striving for the ideal. We're not going to meet the ideal.
Well, it's the rainforest. It's the rainforest analogy, right? Idealism is just a pathway. It's not necessarily a destination on this side of heaven. So it's just like we have to remember that it's the steps that we take, not how far we are or how close we are.
Yeah. You can get so mired in the kind of the sludge and the like everything's bad kind of view of things that you forget that there's hope, and it doesn't have to be all negativity all the time.
Sure. Yeah.
So and not to be this like I'm starting to sound like a therapist who's just like, you just got to think positively and everything will work out. But that's not exactly what I mean.
You got to balance.
Yeah,
I'm sure your wife is a good balance for you.
Yeah, probably.
And my one-day wife will be a great balance for me, because I'm very cynical, like you said.
Yeah, and you need cynical people to help naive people. Like, I think there's kind of a like some people walk through life like, they're just
trusting everyone.
They trust everyone. That doesn't always turn out well.
Yeah.
So yeah, there has to be a balance between all these things, and that's why we review so many movies, so that we balance out all of the different traits of all these directors.
And that's true. Like, someone just told me. So I've had 3 or 4 people talk about listening to the Paul Thomas Anderson series recently, and so we're getting verbal feedback. We want you to email us though at themovievaultpod@gmail.com.
Yeah, no verbal feedback.
Yeah, we don't want to talk
Only
to you.
written
We don't have time. So, but they were saying that they are sometimes they just don't know what films we're doing, and we like to have that breadth of film so that we can get different perspectives, not in like a liberal way of just doing it for the sake of putting a badge on our chest, but also because if you don't watch early Japanese cinema, you don't know cinema. I'm just saying, like clearly, if you don't watch 1950s Japanese cinema, you do not know what cinema is about or where it came from.
Because to be honest, a lot of the stuff we review is relatively well known. I mean, in the grand scope of the area that we're in. As soon as you get through one layer, we always talk about the layers in the rainforest because I think it's a great analogy. It doesn't mean everyone has to love Japanese cinema, but it's the natural place. It's one of the natural places you go as soon as you like start loving watching movies.
It's a large part of the rainforest.
Because I didn't need, and you didn't either. I mean, neither of us started out being like, oh, we're gonna watch Seven Samurai. Like we started with Good Time, something that was actually probably pushed us quite a bit at the time that we watched it. We didn't really understand, the stylization. And
I still get headaches thinking about those camera cuts.
But it was American. It was on Netflix. It was pretty accessible.
Have you rewatched it since the first episode?
See, sometimes I feel like I have, but I don't know that I have.
Like we gotta wait for like a special time to rewatch it, and then just think like, you watch these like Christopher Nolan movies, which are super well made and crafted. And I saw somebody arguing online about like whether Interstellar or Pulp Fiction was better, and I was like, it doesn't matter. They're both good movies, and but they're good for different reasons. And I think some people get so defensive about this movie is like mind blowing from a scientific level, but Pulp Fiction was mind-blowing from like a script writing and very technical filmmaking level that somebody who really appreciates Interstellar might not immediately understand. And so two things. So I think we've just grown in our appreciation for film. Like I struggle now to make my top 100 movies because there's just so many movies I like, and the more that you watch, like now I can go back and watch like Buster Keaton silent movies and be like, this is really interesting. Actually, we've acquired the taste. And two things to that. First of all, Pulp Fiction is much better than Interstellar, just qualitatively and quantitatively, like in every way. Pulp Fiction is better. It influenced way more movies. Just because it influenced doesn't mean it's better, but it influenced and it's better. Both of those things, okay? I just have to that has to be so clear beyond a doubt that the Movie Vault thinks that Pulp Fiction is better than Interstellar. Anyway, second thing. That's not the point. That's the second thing is, yes, it's better, but it's not the point, right? Movies are concepts. Movies are these things that are supposed to get the mind twirling, right? We're supposed to tickle the brain a little bit here and there. And it's not supposed to be like, okay, we're going to rank this on a quantitative scale just like grades at school or elementary school. It's not the spelling bee. This is movies. They're supposed to bring up themes within our own lives that we can reflect on and move and change from. And it's supposed to introduce new ideas, recapitulate on old ideas, and just help us to move forward in life. And it's not anything that is supposed to be categorized. We categorize, but we categorize because we have a podcast. You don't get that right, okay?
Yeah.
That makes me mad that someone said the Interstellar or Pulp. I'm really mad right now because that's not the point. I was thinking about this morning when I got out of bed, Ben. After I did my morning Bible study and I took a shower, I thought, what is the point of movies? Why do we do the podcast? Because I knew we were about to record today, and I thought to myself, well, it's because every time I think about some things in life, I can relate it to a film, right? And that helps me contextualize things and have more open ideas about a certain subject or topic or theme in my own life. See how the film does it. And people keep telling me, Zach, movies are not life. Life is different than movies. I know that, okay, Mom? And the thing is, like, it's not because I think that films and movies are the same thing. It helps me think and process through those things. And sometimes filmmakers have a lot to say on a subject like that. And sometimes they don't. I have my own filters. We critique films like this and messages about those films all the time. But yet, I'm not just taking it at its word. I'm not taking a film director at his word. David Lynch is probably one of my favorite directors of all time. But I'm not just going to take him at his word. We disagree fundamentally, right? If he were actually president, that would probably be terrible. Although I'd get my cup of coffee every morning.
Yeah.
But it's just anyway, you can't compare the two. That's not the point.
Yeah, I appreciate your thoughts on that, and I guess it's something I've been thinking about too. Because when people don't always understand the desire to be. I'm just like I want to watch movies. Like I want to watch as many as I can. Not going too overboard. I don't need to watch 30,000 films like some people on Letterboxd have.
Mario,
but like
Mario.
To the point that time allows at the stage of life that I'm in, like I like watching movies. Like some people like doing other stuff, but and part of that's because it makes me think about things and, like you said, contextualize life. And we forget like these filmmakers are human. They're trying to relate experiences that they've experienced and other humans have experienced in a story-like manner that we can learn from. And humans have always done that for all of time. And books are literature is the same way. You can get a lot out of reading as well. After a year and a half, I'm almost done with Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. And
you're still reading that with your brother?
3 more chapters left.
Are you still meeting with your brother?
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And
that's so nice.
There's, as we've talked about it, there's like it's so rich, which is why it's taken us so long, because it's just like so full of Russian names that are confusing, but also just like themes that are very almost primitive to the human, just fleshes things out in a way that some people are just gifted in being able to do that. Sometimes I wish I was the person who is gifted in that way, but I don't think that's me. I think I'm the person who's supposed to talk about this, introduce other people to these things.
Yeah. Messenger.
So maybe like part of my goal with the podcast is just expand people's thoughts on movies in general and just open their eyes to stuff that I think they would actually enjoy if they gave it the time. Things don't always immediately capture your fancy, but sometimes when you're introduced to one thing, you kind of go down the road. And I was reading a review because Yorgos Lanthimos' Kinds of Kindness went on Hulu, and it reminded me of the like it got like 2-star reviews on Google because people were being like, oh, this is an Emma Stone movie, and they were watching like the weirdest thing ever. And I'm not really trying to defend Yorgos Lanthimos, but like the criticisms that people have are like super kind of like moralistic, and maybe, but I can understand where those people are coming from. And again, I'm not necessarily trying to defend. I have my own thoughts and opinions on whether like a movie like Poor Things, or like, is it excessive in a lot of ways? Probably. But I don't think it's exactly in the way that people criticize. I don't think, and maybe I'm being optimistic in this sense, but I don't think Yorgos Lanthimos is this like sick guy who's trying to like get like this disgusting stuff on. I think he actually, the way that he thinks about things, and he's Greek, he's European, so you have to keep that in mind too. These Europeans, they think about things in weird ways, but they.
Wow. Okay. That's a Ben statement. That's not a movie vault statement.
Not all Europeans, but the European cinema is just different, and so that's gonna shock and make some people in America really mad.
The Europeans won't be mad at that.
I don't think it's exactly the criticism. While it may be warranted, it's not exactly in the way that some people are wording it, where it's just this like black and white moral thing.
Auteur theory is real. You have to understand what the core of the film is.
And there, there has to be a line. Like there's films out there that I know about that I won't say their name, but like, they probably push the line way past what should be acceptable.
Well, you got to set your mind on things above sometimes. Not just because of the.
And sometimes it's also like some people can, some films get way too violent for people's taste, and that's fine too. You can have, your own lines as far as what you want on those. Like, why? There's some people would be like, why would you subject yourself? And we've talked about that a little bit on the podcast. But and maybe the podcast is also just like fleshing out. Like it is good to ask yourself why sometimes, not just like why watch these movies. But at the end of the day, I think it's because Akira Kurosawa is an amazing filmmaker. Yeah. And Paul Thomas Anderson's an amazing filmmaker. Yeah. And we just, over time I was commenting to Zach that early on, like the movies that we picked weren't necessarily like Trolls. Crazy. Yeah. Trolls, Lovebirds. They weren't movies that are like critically acclaimed. And it was probably good that we practiced on those.
Well, we haven't done, even since then, even the films that we do now, a lot of them aren't super critically acclaimed. I mean, I wouldn't say that like, I don't know. I'm just thinking of Jarmusch. Like, he's not super critically acclaimed.
Yeah, I mean, he's critically acclaimed.
Okay.
He's not like, he doesn't have a giant fan base, though.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, that's
he has movies that aren't critically acclaimed too. So, I mean, some of these people are like, they have a few films that people think are masterpieces, and then they have other films that people think are like disasters.
We did what's the film, Jim Jarmusch's film about Memphis? What's that one called again?
Mystery
Train. We did Mystery Train following a Kurosawa film, so maybe we should think about that.
Do another Jarmusch film.
Maybe. So Roger Ebert says, Yojimbo was followed quickly by Kurosawa Sanjuro, which also stars Mifune, the greatest modern Japanese actor, he says modern, which is 1950s, playing the same character or one so similar as makes no difference. Doesn't matter. He acts as the advisor for 9 uncannily similar brothers who are remarkably inept samurai. The choreography in Sanjuro is one of its best jokes, and this is why I'm bringing it up. The brothers do everything together. Nod, recoil, agree, laugh, gasp. And they follow Sanjuro in a kind of conga line until he snaps, "We can't move around like a centipede."
That was funny. That was hilarious.
But this is where it gets good. So he says the difference between the two films is that Sanjuro is a comedy in which ancient samurai traditions are exposed as ludicrous by the pragmatic hero, while Yojimbo is more subversive. The samurai were famed for their unyielding loyalty to their employers, but Sanjuro actually finds himself unemployed because of the collapse of the feudal system in the end of the Edo period, becomes a modern man who is able to manipulate both sides because they persist in thinking that he will be faithful to those who pay him. And there is a moment in the end when the old and new hang in balance. The wounded Sanjuro no longer has his sword, but we have seen him practicing with the knife. This is the end of Yojimbo. Skewering a bit of paper as it flutters around a room, he faces Unosuke, the gunman, remember that's the youngest brother, without revealing precisely what happens between them. Let me ask you to consider the moment when Unosuke aims his pistol at Sanjuro. It may be loaded, it may not be. Sanjuro cannot be absolutely sure. He is free to move away or to disarm Unosuke, but instead he sits perfectly motionless, prepared to accept whatever comes. This, it strikes me, is the act of a samurai aware that his time is past and accepting the perfect equanimity whatever the new age has to offer. And I think that's reflective in Sanjuro as well. Yojimbo is a more serious film.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's interesting too to point out that both films can have like criticisms of the same things but do it in different ways.
Yeah.
So, more flexibility from Kurosawa.
And you're right.
And Roger Ebert, also brilliant.
Yeah, always.
But also wrong sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not wrong because opinion things maybe can't really be right or wrong, but still.
He gave 4 stars. He called his review A Fistful of Samurai.
He knows the history. Apparently he had this was his favorite modern Japanese actor, which means he had a favorite classic. I guess that would have been like the 1920s.
Hey, maybe it was Takako Airi. Maybe it was the Chamberlain's wife. But he's right in saying that Sanjuro is more of a comedy, kind of making fun of these ancient samurai techniques because the samurai are idiots in this film, right? They're dumb. They're just trying to stay by their word, but they just fail completely. Like they're their fighting techniques, but they're in a centipede line. You know, they're about to attack this caravan of the Chamberlain's men, but Sanjuro tells them not to. And when they're about to, the superintendent's men come. So Yojimbo was right to not do what Japanese samurai would have originally done.
And they're very reactionary, whereas Yojimbo is he thinks ahead.
Yep.
And it's like it showcases them as like people who only react to things, and that just if they didn't have any guidance, they would just stumble and bumble around reacting to things until they ultimately failed.
Yeah, and it just shows that the samurai schools are not as good anymore or non-existent. The Chamberlain needs to reassess his school.
Yeah, down with the samurai.
Yeah, so Kurosawa captures that really well. I think they are different films. And I even think Mifune, his acting carries on. It's definitely the same character. Again, Ebert said it doesn't matter. It doesn't, but it's the same thing. It's really he comes in, sees a conflict, tries to help. Although this time, he's not really looking for much monetary gain besides a meal.
Yeah, Yojimbo, if I remember, he played both sides a little bit more.
Trying to gain. Yeah.
And it leaned more into that than this, where he's like clearly on one side and deceiving the other side. Yeah. He's not deceiving both sides necessarily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that you're 100% right. In this, he's maybe a little bit more noble, and that's why I think this film takes place after the first film, whereas Sergio Leone's go in reverse order by release date, and it's because it seems like maybe he learned from that Yojimbo experience that the ancient samurai days aren't as useful now in modern society, modern quotation marks, 1950s, 60s, but also that financial gain isn't the way that he should go about life. I don't know. We need to watch more Mifune movies.
Yes. So I wonder how many movies, he's really known over here for the Kurosawa movies, but I wonder if he's in he must have been in a bunch of other movies too.
Yeah, I don't know.
Assume.
I don't know. That'd be a good question to ask.
Well, it's interesting. I think we've talked about this before, that Kurosawa is like also one of the first foreign directors to gain broad recognition in the U.S.
Yeah.
Not that Kurosawa cares that much about that, but it is interesting. And I was watching a video where somebody was pointing out like movies that were more obscure that you might not have heard about. He was talking about like South American cinema, and he was like, yeah, South American cinema just doesn't get the respect that like Japanese or like what would that be, East Asian cinema,
sure,
and like Western European cinema get. Like if you're gonna go, it's basically like, obviously in the US we know about Hollywood, and then if you go beyond that, you're like, okay, French films, Western Europe, there's these directors that we know about, and then you're gonna go to East Asia and be like Kurosawa and Wong Kar-wai and Park Chan-wook and Bong Joon-ho, and go down the line of like the different Asian countries that directors from, but you don't immediately go to like South American. So it's interesting to think about like how Asian culture we always think about how America influenced other cultures because Hollywood's so big, but it also happened the other way. Yeah. And it's a little bit more, it's more subtle. And this goes back to like, again, what we were talking about with why people automatically discount like foreign movies, but they're actually like very influential on the movies, like you said. Yeah. And it kind of brings us back full circle to saying like Kurosawa influenced Star Wars. Mm-hmm. Star Wars, maybe the biggest movie in American history. Mm-hmm. Like broadly, and it influenced more than Endgame, and Endgame and Avatar. Star Wars, the biggest movie. Yeah, you might say The Godfather's the most revered, but I think Star Wars is the most important film that has come out in the U.S. And that film wouldn't exist without Kurosawa. Yeah. So, I think we always tend to think this way, but everything goes around the globe, know. And that's where I would say I just challenge people to like look beyond. It's always we live in a big country. We need to look beyond ourselves. Like we haven't really dipped our toes in any Bollywood yet, so we need to think about that. Yeah, it's or like any great part of the world. This guy was also recommending like a movie from Cameroon. I was like, yeah, I've watched one movie from like Egypt. Yeah, and that's it. Okay, so I have a lot West African movies. I have a lot to catch up on. Yep. We'll do a Cameroonian arc. Yeah. That'll be good. Well, do you have any final thoughts closing on this film? Sanjuro is a perfect example of how to execute a sequel, and is memorable because of its criticism of its kind of its cultural heritage, but also leaves room for growth for everyone. So it's not all cynical. So idealism is sometimes good. That's my final thought. Good. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's a good final. Sometimes thought. Good. Sure. It's my advice is just watch it. It's a great film. Put those subtitles on, watch it. It is hard. I mean, I think I struggled more than I normally do watching this movie, and it might just been I was tired. But you do have to pay in our world where we get easily distracted. Mm-hmm. Foreign movies you do have to pay a little bit more attention to because you have to actually read everything. You can't just listen and get distracted as much. So it'll help. It's a good exercise though. Yeah. So even if you don't watch one foreign movie and then watch 20 more American movies, it's good to do it every once in a while, I think. Yeah, definitely. Well, with that, Ben, do you have any movie? I can go for my movie highlights. I have one movie highlight. So I'll start with, I watched Princess Mononoke again. I rewatched it. It's my favorite Studio Ghibli film, or Ghibli, whatever you say. Still haven't seen any Studio Ghibli films, shockingly. So good. So I need to good. You got to start with Princess Mononoke or build your way up to it because I think it's the best one, but it's not considered the best one, but it's my favorite. So 4.5 stars for that. I watched The Man from Earth. It's a conversation in a living room where a guy who is immortal is trying to convince his adjunct professors that he's immortal. That's literally the premise of the film. And he claims to be Jesus. So, anyway, do what you will with that. I gave it 3 stars. Interesting. That's it. Okay. I rewatched Drugstore Cowboy and gave it 5 stars. It's a movie that catalogs a group of people who rob drugstores. Okay. In order to get certain types of drugs, like
makes sense.
And it even has more of a personal connection because these are actually drugs that I interact with at work now,
okay,
on a daily basis. So obviously I'm not using them. I'm using them for appropriate use in patient settings. But it's interesting because these drugs have quite impacted our society in a lot of ways. And this was actually before the opioid epidemic as we know it that this movie came out. So it's interesting to watch. But it's kind of interesting because it's like a glamorized version of like very attractive people who are drug addicts. I'm like, it's not realistic at all. Like Matt Dillon, is going around robbing hospitals. He literally robs a hospital in the movie. And then he tries to get clean. So it has some redemption. Good. But it also it's fascinating to me, and I don't know what it is about. It's kind of the 5-star movie that I have of like the 29 or 30 that I've given 5 stars that I wouldn't be able to necessarily defend it as like a 5-star movie in the same regards as the other ones, but it just watching it, I'm just like satisfied with the experience.
Well, good.
So Gus Van Sant, I think an underrated director.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you're satisfied with Drugstore Cowboys. That's good.
If you want to watch a good movie about drugs.
Yeah. That or Breaking Bad, the show. Or El Camino. That's a good film. Have you seen El Camino?
I have seen El Camino.
Good. Just making sure. You've seen the whole Breaking Bad lore.
I have seen all of it.
You haven't seen Better Call Saul?
No, I've watched all that.
Okay. But you haven't seen all Breaking Bad?
I have.
Okay.
So
you're caught up.
I'm caught up.
Okay, good.
It took me a while, but I'm caught up.
Okay. Well, I can close the vault. Or contact Hedman England Agency with any of your house, home, business, or auto insurance needs.
614-486-7300.
614-486-7300.
In the description. Also, in the description now, show notes.
Yep.
Thanks to our friends, Artificial Intelligence.
Thank you.
Spotify for Podcasters now has Riverside, which I just upload the podcast and they give me titles for our segments, and more times than not I agree with them. Sometimes I adjust them a little bit, but it helps if you are like bored by us but you're interested by us sometimes, and you're like,
if you want to know when we stop talking about BlackRock and Vanguard, you can skip the amount of time.
You can skip. You can look at the show notes. You'd be like, okay, this part I might hit the 30-second button through, and we won't be offended.
Yeah.
But it's just, or maybe if you're even deciding to watch the movie that we're talking about, because that's kind of my goal, is like you see that we reviewed it and you go watch the movie and then listen to the review.
Yep. But we are messengers of that word.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's kind of my goal. So hopefully the show notes help with that. And then you can follow us on Instagram. We're not super active, but the Movie Vault Pod. We do post when we have new episodes, though. Mm-hmm. And then, and you can also DM us.
Yeah.
And email us at themovievaultpod@gmail.com.
Yep.
Don't really use our Twitter at all, so or X or whatever. So we'll let you know if we ever start that back up.
Yep. Well, with that, I'll close the vault. Dun 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 dun. Eat Chick-fil-A.